Okay, good evening. I'm Melissa Kearns. I'm going to deliver a lesson to you today about photosynthesis, and I'm going to start off by sharing my warm-up screen with you. Okay, here's the title. Today we're going to be looking at energy transfer and specifically the role of photosynthesis in the transfer of energy. Okay, for our warm-up activity, what I'd like you to do is use a small dry erase board or a piece of scratch paper and write down 3 things that you had for lunch. And then after you write them on the paper, I'd like you to go ahead and share them with everybody using the text box in Zoom. Okay, do we have some fun things coming up in the text box? A few interesting things? Okay, now that we know what everybody likes to eat for lunch, I'd like you to look at your paper and think about those items that you ate and the energy contained in them and where that energy came from. So did the energy that you ate and consumed, did that come from another organism? Or was the organism or the food that you ate, did that come from a source of living tissue that was actually fueled by the sun? So I'd like to share with you my screen, show you what I had for lunch. Okay, all right, you can see that there. So my lunch was an apple and a cheese stick. And I'm just using 2 because I'm not as interesting as the students. All right, so with that apple, where did the apple come from? Okay, let's figure out. The apple comes from an apple tree. Where did that apple tree get its energy from? Where does it get the energy to live? Okay, so it doesn't have to eat anything, right? It gets its energy from the sun. When an organism doesn't need to consume another organism for its food source, and it can take that energy directly from the sun, it's called an autotroph. Okay, you may remember these terms from your life science class. Now let's look at what else I ate here. Okay, so I had a cheese stick. Cheese stick is made from milk. Milk comes from cows. Where do cows get their energy? What do cows eat? Okay, so the cows eat grass. And where does grass get its energy from? Does it have to eat another organism, or does it get its energy from the sun? All right, so you know this. It gets its energy from the sun. That means that a grass is an autotroph. It's able to make, it's an organism that can make its own energy. All right, so I'd like you to go ahead and complete this on your paper right now. And in a second, I'd like you to hold them all up so I can see and get an idea if how this is going. Okay, all right, that looks good. So we're gonna go ahead and continue now and look further at photosynthesis, which is the whole process by which you get energy from the sun, and then you're able to convert that light energy into something your body can use, and furthermore, what your cells can use. All right, so this was our warm-up activity. All right, so we are going to look at photosynthesis today. We're going to talk about what exactly photosynthesis is, the location, which is where photosynthesis occurs, the overall reaction and process of photosynthesis. Furthermore, we're going to look at the 2 steps of photosynthesis. So there's 2 parts. There's a light reaction and a dark reaction. And we're going to look at both of those, figure out what the reactants are and what the products are, and also where those reactions take place. All right, here's an overview of the photosynthetic process and the photosynthetic equation. If you look on the left side, you see reactants. On the right side, you see products. Reactants are anything that goes into a reaction. Products are the end result and what comes out of the reaction. So for photosynthesis, you have carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. And in this case, the energy is, sorry about that, the light from the sun. So those are your three reactants for photosynthesis. Very, very clear. Okay, that makes two products. So oxygen is made, and then also something called glucose. Glucose is a sugar molecule that our bodies use in order to store energy for later use. Okay, so this is really a monumental mover of energy in the universe, where you have light energy from the sun coming in, and through its conversion, it's able to produce something that actually fuels humans that we're able to use. Okay, so for those of you who are familiar with the chemical formula for this, I'm not going to require it, but it's written as carbon dioxide, which is CO2, plus water, which is H2O, in the presence of sunlight then gives you glucose, C6H12O6, and it gives you oxygen gas, which is O2. Okay, and there's a pictorial display down below that actually shows you visually what the components are. Okay. So just to review, the big idea is that photosynthesis is a process where plants use the light energy of the sun, and they're able to convert that to make chemical energy. Now, the chemical energy that is made through photosynthesis is called glucose. Okay, it's a form of sugar molecule. And in plant cells, glucose is used for three things. The first thing it's used for is to make a component called cellulose, shown right here. Okay, now cellulose you might know as another name called fiber. So this is something that plants make for structure. We can't digest it, yet it's part of our overall health to consume enough fiber. I'm sure everybody's heard their parents talk about that. It's abundant in healthy vegetable matter that you would eat, such as broccoli, spinach, apples, oatmeal. All of that contains a lot of cellulose. Okay, and once again, glucose is that 6-carbon molecule then that's formed into other hydrocarbon molecules within the cell. The second molecule that's used, that glucose is used to synthesize, is starch. Starch is for long-term energy storage. We're familiar with it in vegetables such as corn and potatoes. And the third and very important thing, this is I won't say the most important thing, but it's important for humans as well as plants. The third thing glucose is used to do is it actually goes through a process called cellular respiration, and ATP is made. Okay, why is ATP important? We can have glucose, and that's sugar, but when our cells are trying to do things like send a signal, go ahead and like any movement in the cell, any signal, lots of enzyme processes, for those to occur, they only use ATP. They don't use glucose. So ATP is so important for your cellular functions. So glucose is wonderful. So we get the energy from the sun, goes to glucose, then our bodies take glucose, go through cellular respiration, and we are able to produce a lot of ATP energy. All right, so let's see how things, how you're coming with this. Let's do a little bit of a knowledge check. Please write your answers on your dry erase board or piece of paper and hold them up so I can get a look to see how everybody's doing. I'm gonna leave this up for a little bit so you guys can go ahead and see all the questions. Number one is, what does the sun provide for photosynthesis? Number two, what is the chemical energy that's made during photosynthesis? Number three, glucose is used for three things in plant cells. Can you name all three of them? And finally, what is ATP made from? So remember, ATP is a currency in the cell, and where does it come from? So what do we need for ATP to be made in order to fuel all of our cellular processes? Okay. Now please go ahead and show them. Let me see a little bit so I can see how everybody's coming. All right, let's go through the answers. So the sun provides light energy for photosynthesis. The chemical energy that's made during photosynthesis is a sugar called glucose. Now, what are the three things in plant cells that glucose is used for? In plant cells, glucose is used to produce ATP by the process of cellular respiration. It's used to form long chain starch molecules that are used for long-term energy usage, storage and usage. And finally, in plants, it's used as a structural component called cellulose. What is ATP made from? It's made from glucose through the process of cellular respiration. And does anybody have any questions? Okay, you can go ahead and enter them in the chat box, and I'll use my board and explain some of those concepts again if we need it. Okay, let's move on to where photosynthesis happens. Okay, this is very similar to the organization of our body. So when you think of the order of organization and how you actually determine the location of photosynthesis, you can get further and you can get more and more specific as you go further into the organism. Okay, so let's go through the order of organization. First, you would have a plant. Then looking further in, you would have the leaves. So the leaves primarily, they conduct the most photosynthesis of all the structures in the plant. Okay, so you have a leaf. If you do a cross section of the leaf and you look at the different layers of the leaf, you have cuboidal plant cells throughout the leaf in different layers, okay? And what you have towards the top, not the waxy exodermis at the very top, but the next layer in, it's a layer of cells that are very translucent and they're rich in the organelle that we call chloroplast, okay? So if you look at the cells here, here's a close-up. We've studied the plant cell. We know that it has a rigid cell shape, a very large central vacuole. Here is our organelle of interest, which is the chloroplast. So this is something that's specialized, of course, for plants and not humans. This is a close-up of the chloroplast. And you'll see that it's a membrane-bound structure. And if you cut through that membrane and you look inside, this is what you're going to see. Here's the membrane part up at the top. And then there's different stacks, or like teeny tiny pancakes, and they're green. And what that is a thylakoid membrane. And it's a membrane that contains a lot of components that are able to transform the energy from the sun. So the main thing we're looking at and what makes it look green to us is a pigment called chlorophyll. So inside the pancakes, now remember these pancakes are called thylakoids or thylakoid membranes. If you look at a stack of them, it's kind of like a short stack and tall stack, just like you're ordering pancakes, it's a granum, okay? In the thylakoid membranes, you have chlorophyll, which is a pigment that absorbs light energy. So this pigment is embedded in the membranes of the thylakoids. Now, this area here in between the stacks is known as a stroma. So this is a space in between the membranes, and it contains, it's a fluid that contains enzymes and different molecules that are also part of photosynthesis. You have to remember here, chlorophyll though is a pigment that actually absorbs energy from the sun. So we have a whole mechanism, a whole machine that's going to conduct photosynthesis, but the important molecule that captures the light in the beginning is called chlorophyll. And I know it's confusing because chlorophyll and chloroplast, we're studying photosynthesis and they're so similar. Try to remember chloroplast from your study of organelles, that it's specialized organelles, and chlorophyll is being the actual light capturing pigment. All right, let's do another knowledge check to see how everybody's going. Please write your answers on a dry erase board or a piece of paper and hold them up when you're done so I know how you're coming with the questions. All right, first question. Photosynthesis takes place in specialized organelles called what, which exist inside the leaf cell. So what are the specialized organelles that conduct photosynthesis? 2, chloroplasts contain an inner membrane called what? What are the important inner membranes in chloroplast? And finally, please tell me the pigment that's responsible for capturing the light energy of the sun. Okay, I'll give you time, and then we'll review the answers. Okay, so photosynthesis takes place within the chloroplast, which are specialized organelles that plants have. Inside a chloroplast, you have stacks of membranes called thylakoid membranes, and this is where you have the chlorophyll embedded, which is the actual molecule that begins the process of photosynthesis. It captures the light energy. All right, there are 2 steps of photosynthesis. The first is a light reaction. And the second reaction is a dark reaction. And I know this is confusing because it goes by 3 names. And they are the dark reaction, the light independent reaction, which of course it means that it is separated, it doesn't need to be connected to the light reaction. And finally, it's also known as the Calvin cycle. All right, here's a depiction of the light reaction in a very straightforward manner. So what you're looking at is a chloroplast right here. This is the membrane-bound organelle inside of the plant cells. Okay, so this is your chloroplast. Chloroplast receives sunlight from the sun. You have water that exists because the plants uptake water through their roots. Okay, so the sunlight hits the thylakoid membrane, and when it does, it activates the chlorophyll. Okay, so then the light energy actually causes the chlorophyll to vibrate, and that's resonance energy, and it gets converted then into 2 compounds. One is ATP, the other is known as NADPH. Now, the important thing I want you to know about these 2 molecules are that ATP, as we've talked about before, this is an energy transfer molecule. It's important because it's the energy currency in the cell. Your cell can't do processes without ATP, okay? So that's a form of energy, and NADPH is an electron-bearing electron carrier. So these 2 molecules then go on to the next reaction in photosynthesis called the dark reaction. Now, if we're looking at the diagram here, can you please tell me by typing into the chat box, what are the reactants of the light reaction and what are the products? So remember, reactants are any components that go into a reaction. The products are anything that is produced and goes out. So look at the arrows here and tell me which ones are going into the process of photosynthesis and which ones are going out. Okay. All right, so sunlight and water are the 2 reactants that are going into the process of photosynthesis. ATP, your electron, which is the form of energy, gives energy by transferring. NADPH, okay, this is an electron carrier, and oxygen are all made during the reaction that takes place in the thylakoid membrane. Now let's summarize. The light reaction requires sunlight, and that's obvious because you need the energy from the sun to start this whole process of photosynthesis. The sunlight then excites electrons in chlorophyll, and those excited electrons then actually go through a process where they become ATP. So these high energy electrons transfer their energy through a process that we're not going to go into depth with right now, called the electron transport chain, and water is made. Remember, water is a reactant. Water is a reactant in light reaction, and it gets split during the process of the light reaction. Okay, and as we covered before, ATP which is your energy molecule, NADPH, which is your electron carrier, and oxygen are the products of this first step of photosynthesis. Okay, here's a depiction of the dark reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle, and also known as a light independent reaction. Okay, what we're looking at here, let's review. This is your chloroplast, okay? This is the stroma. So what am I not showing in this picture? What I'm not showing are the stacks of pancakes, okay? I'm not showing those because I'm just focusing on the Calvin cycle, known as a dark reaction. And these are the reactants here on the left. If you notice, two of these were actually made during the process of the light reaction, ATP and NADPH. Carbon dioxide comes from where? Carbon dioxide comes from us, both our factories and our breathing. We produce carbon dioxide, and that diffuses into the leaf layers of the plant. So these three reactants go through the dark reaction, and this is where the sugar molecule known as glucose is finally made. Okay, so you could actually envision this as having some pancake structures right over here, and you could have a light reaction going on. And then once the light reaction produces these products that are then used as the reactants for the dark reaction can take place. It does not have to be dark for the dark reaction to take place, and that's why it's light independent. As long as a light starts the process and you go through the light reaction, you have now made two reactants that you need in order to go through the dark reaction and achieve glucose. Okay, let's review the main features then of the dark reaction. The dark reaction does not require sunlight. This reaction takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast, not the thylakoid membranes. Okay? Now, you need two products of the light reaction, though, in order to get the dark reaction started and complete it. Those are ATP and NADPH from the light reaction come in. And finally, glucose is the product of the dark reaction. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like you all to log into your Quizlet set, and I'd like to practice, I'd like to review the diagrams and practice the vocabulary that I've set up based upon a lecture in your Quizlet set. And then I'd like to do a little review of the process after that. And I'd like to tell you what happens in the chloroplast. So let's go ahead and review the process just very, very briefly. So photosynthesis takes light energy, converts it to chemical energy, okay? Now, it takes place in two different parts. There's a light reaction and a dark reaction. And the light reaction takes water and sunlight. Then it goes through the photosystem in the thylakoid membrane. It produces ATP and NADPH as products, okay? Then the dark reaction takes over once those products are in the stroma of the chloroplast, and you have NADPH and you have ATP, and then you have carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They go through the dark reaction, and then your product is glucose. And remember why glucose is important? Glucose goes through cellular respiration, and it makes ATP that is necessary for all cellular functions. And that is really the wonder of photosynthesis. Now, at this point, I would ask you to do a review right now, and I would set up the Amoeba Sisters video. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's reviews the entire process. It's very visual, and it shows the molecules, and it shows things being cut and moving. So I would play that right now. And then after that, what I'd like to do is to set all the students up for their homework. All right, so for your homework is to draw a chloroplast and model the light and dark reactions of photosynthesis. I'd like you to include the light reactions, the light reaction and the dark reaction. Please identify where they're taking place, label your reactants and what is happening in each one of those reactions. And we're going to do a little review. Let me do the stop share. Okay. Okay, so this is your chloroplast. And remember, where is the chloroplast in the cell? Remember, this is a specific organelle to plant cells. Inside your chloroplast, you have pancakes. I'd like you to go ahead and let me know what these pancakes are. And then you have another space where you have something called the Calvin cycle going. Okay, so which one of these is responsible for the light reaction? Which one is responsible for the dark reaction? So label your light reaction, your dark reaction. Show me reactants. Show me what is going through this process. Show me what's coming out as a product. Same thing over here. Big R for reactants and a P for products. Okay. I'd like you to go ahead and do this. Label this after watching the review video, and I'd like you to take a picture, or you can scan it and send it to my email address. All right, thank you very much.